Consulting. I would say, weirdly enough, kind of like parenting.
That's a good one.
I guess like parenting can be a profession for sure, right?
Yeah,
Some people it's unpaid labor, it's paid labor. It's definitely a profession,
yeah,
and I think a lot of it, like times, like we're not doing anything crazy. We're just like party A is beefing with party B, and we're just kind of there to like diffuse the situation and like get both sides to agree on something. Like
yeah.
or like maybe we're babysitting or like holding someone's hand to get to like the objective, like, hey, we need you to do this, like, and like maybe they're being difficult and they're not doing it, so we make like a job aid, like, hey, here's how you do it, so that like
Yeah.
it takes them less time. Like I feel like a lot of our job is just making other people's jobs easier.
Mm. Welcome to the Unknown Options, a place where we explore the unknown options. My name is Will, and today I have with me Pej. Pej, it's great to have you here. We want to explore your journey, so we want to highlight the good, the bad, and the ugly. For someone who might not know, what is a senior consultant?
A senior consultant would be someone that is a couple of years past entry level at the consultant level, so you'd say probably like 3 to 5 years of experience at that point. They're a little bit more, they're able to lead like teams of like 1 to 5 on their own. They're able to understand the contents from their manager of what needs to be done for the assignment without as much explanation, and they're able to lead a few of the younger consultants on their own.
Okay, I love that. How did Pej get started in consulting? Tell us the journey.
How did I get started in consulting? Well, so that's actually a funny story. Funny enough, I went to UNC Charlotte like yourself, and at the internship fair, I was waiting around. I had finished my rounds of all my, handing out my resume, doing my introductions, and at that point, I was just waiting on a friend to finish up. He was going to one last final company, so I didn't really want to stand idle around. So I looked around, scanned the room. I was like, all right, I'm MIS major, finance major. Where do I see companies? And I saw NTT Data. And standing there was one of the recruiters, Shelby Gann, and she was actually the recruiter that ended up working with me to get hired. And that was kind of where we picked up. It was just kind of fate.
Nice. So networking events work, is what you're
They
saying.
luckily enough, if you right place, right time, things work out.
Nice. I love it. I love it. So tell us about what consulting is and what it contributes to society.
So I think consulting can vary in different circumstances, right? I think primarily the way I see consulting is that someone has a problem and we're here to kind of assist them through it and fix it.
Okay.
Whether we're the ones fixing it or making a recommendation on how the problem gets fixed is a different story, but we're kind of essentially we're there to fix a problem. And the way I've seen it thus far in my 4 year career, it feels like we go on to engagements that are typically 6 to 12 months on average. So you're there to fix a specific problem or deploy a specific project.
Mm.
Once you've accomplished your mission, you're in and out and on to the next opportunity.
Okay. How long does like the typical project last in your tenure?
I would say projects. So from my personal experience, I've had like above average like project lengths because I participated on a merger, which typically go much longer in length. But from what we've been told and what my other colleagues have experienced, I would say 6 to 12 months is what your average project length would be. And then after that, if there's still incomplete work or there's something else that has been added to the scope of responsibility, you might get a contract extension for another 6 to 12 months. But certain clients and whatnot, they might have limitations on third party like support. So you might not be able to go, 2 full years without any issues. You might have to stop at like 18 months, take a break, and then get renewed in the future next financial year.
Okay, I love it. That makes sense. We're going to take a little step back. And I know you said you were an MIS and finance major. Tell us about young Tej, your journey through high school, how you ended up at UNC Charlotte, and then maybe your first couple years, like adjusting from college life to consulting life.
Yeah, so I'd say in high school, I generally knew that I wanted to do business. I think one of the problems that I had with our education system, I feel like I couldn't really get a good understanding of what that looked like. Like what from like the real world, like what we're learning, how does that apply to things in the real world? Like how does this geometry quiz I'm taking get used like 5-10 years from now when I'm actually working and doing internships or working a full like time job, what does that look like? So for me, I just generally knew I like numbers. I figured it was going to be business. I was good at math. I didn't really particularly like science. So that was high school for me. Applied to UNC Charlotte for finance and went into as pre-business. Throughout my business experience, I feel like I learned a couple things about myself. I feel like accounting was really not my forte. I wasn't a fan, didn't really like it. Operations and supply chain management, interesting concept, but like not my thing. But MIS, the finance classes, those two particularly stood out to me. MIS was one that I noticed later on as like it stuck out because I feel like I could relate it to my real life, right? Like
Mhm.
I feel like I've grown up playing a lot of like on the computer. We're always having video games and mobile phones. So the concept of MIS and information systems, I feel like was doing a really good job painting a lot of picture, making those connections for me.
Okay.
And then the finance classes was just overall, what I went to school for, what I was interested in. At that point, I hadn't lost any interest. So I ended up declaring finance our junior year. I think that's when the third year is when you declare your major. Um, and then at some point in the middle of the year, I learned that if you get a second or third major in the same, I guess, like realm of major that you got initially. So for my situation, I was finance, which is in the business realm. I would say, well, not I would say, sorry. They, the way that it works is the second major would only be like 5 additional classes, like 15 credits worth.
Okay.
So if you were like in my situation, I was a semester ahead coming in from my AP credits. So a semester ahead with 5 classes, I could graduate on time 4 years with all my peers and friends, and then I would have 2 degrees as opposed to one for the same
Mhm.
cost of.
Okay.
So I actually didn't know that going in. I'm not really sure how I found it out. I think in that situation I was trying like to like find a minor and like maybe double minor, triple minor, just like to beef up my resume a bit because I didn't have any internship experience.
Mhm.
And it was my guidance counselor. She suggested that I instead of triple minoring, which probably isn't the best idea, she suggested just doing a double major. And she
Okay.
explained that concept, and I was like, ah, so like I would suggest that approach for others. I think it's a really cost effective way to get a whole second degree that people spend tens of thousands of dollars to get a 4 year degree, and you can
Yeah.
get two for the price of one.
Very smart. Okay. I wanna ask two questions. First, can you break down because like my audience is it's a lot of people. It's people that are older, people that are our age, people that are younger than us. So what can you break down MIS for us? And then also, there's like been like a conversation around like boot camp certifications. What can a consult can a person become a consultant without a degree? Is that possible?
I would say I'm sure it's possible. I mean, I don't see why not, right? Like the level of work quality being done isn't too difficult that what someone without a degree wouldn't be able to do. I
Mhm.
think it really just depends on like whatever firms are out there hiring. And
Mm,
I feel like as you found like in corporate America, most of them do require a degree.
yeah.
So I think it's really just finding some that don't, but I'm not sure what is honestly out there. I know for my company, they definitely require a college degree. So
Mhm.
I think the work is definitely able to be done from someone without a degree. You would just have to like do some learning, as you mentioned. Certificates are one way to catch up on it, but no, could definitely be done. Um, I'd say for me to break down just like certificates that I would have done. I did my certificates when I was at NTT, so I
Okay.
came in with MIS, which you mentioned. In my situation, was really focused around like Excel, um, diagrams, ERDs. We had to learn a bunch of those, and then, but primarily for me, I learned that I liked Excel and like displaying and manipulating data. Right,
Mhm.
so in consulting, there was a lot of reporting analyst roles that kind of like made sense with my background, and that's kind of what I was leaning for when I joined. So I initially joined, got on my project, and when I was on that first project, that's when I started exploring what other certificates are out there that would make sense in consulting. I learned a lot of teams work in like an agile environment. So from like it's one of the project management methodologies. There's way of doing it, which is waterfall, which is one task at a time going down like the waterfall. And then there's agile where everyone's working kind of all at once.
Okay.
So I ended up taking a certificate around that, the professional scrum master one from scrum.org. So that was something that NTT ended up reimbursing if you passed the exam. So I ended up doing that one. And then I think 2 years later, I ended up doing a change management certificate. So that one was called ProSci, PROSCI. That one was really costly, but it was again reimbursed by the company. I personally wouldn't recommend it just because of the cost alone. I don't know the exact
Mm,
figure, but they said it was a couple $1,000s. So I think the material we learned was really good. I think change management was going over the philosophy of introducing change. I think
mm,
it does a really good job making sure that like when you're doing change, you're like being an effective partner and like communicating what's coming, making sure folks understand, getting rid of any roadblocks ahead of time before they happen. Once things do, make sure that you're communicating effective material so that things like go smoothly, make everyone's life easy. Just kind of recognizing that overall people don't like change. Like you and I like
mm.
don't like uncomfortable change. We have routines. So you're the point of it is to make everyone's life easier is how I see it.
Yeah.
So it was good material and lesson. I just didn't believe in the cost. So
Mm,
if you were to make a recommendation on what to do to become a consultant, I would say the agile scrum route is a really cost effective way. I don't think that exam was as much. It was 180, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
okay.
There's a lot of material online. There's books that I think are relatively cheap. Scrum Masters, I met one 2 years ago at a bar, and he worked at Wells Fargo, and he was making they have Scrum Masters based on Scrum Master 1, 2, 3 on onwards. He was already making close to six figures a year and a half, 2 years out of college. So
Mm,
they're definitely a worthy path to go with the consulting route. But mine was
okay.
more since I took the PSM one, it was the first introductory level. I believe there's also a PSM 2 and 3. Those definitely take, like a further route into it. But I wanted a bit of exposure because I felt like in the role that I was in, I kept hearing that terminology and I
Hmm.
was a bit lost. So I felt like even though I was more focused on like, reporting and living in Excel and like running dashboards, it was nice to know what's going on around me so that I can like learn and like actually, like kind of like a sponge. Like I want to soak information because in that situation, given like the lack of like internship experience, I wanted to learn as much as I can from my first job in case, there ever wasn't a first job, right? What if you get laid
Yeah.
off? You want to gather as much information from the first one so that for the next one, it's a lot easier because you're an experienced individual.
I love that. That was a great detailed answer. It's actually funny because our last interviewer, he said he got his certification, the Scrum Master certification, because he wanted to understand the language that was being spoken around him. That's actually crazy. That's crazy.
To me, sometimes they feel like a cult. It's a very funny concept, but I mean, a lot of folks try to go agile.
Mm,
From what a lot of my managers will joke around, they'll call it wagile instead, where they're paying for an agile transformation, but they kind of stick to their old waterfall behaviors and they don't want to change how they've done things. Right, like they want their like we have these things called four blockers, which is literally just like a PowerPoint slide broken into four, kind of to give a status update.
hmm,
That's more of a waterfall concept of like way of working, right? Like agile
hmm.
teams are supposed to have like daily stand-ups where it's like, like zero, like typically 1 to 15 minutes long. You quickly give your update, like any like roadblocks you're having, what you accomplish, stuff like that, right? So it's a
Okay.
different approach. So if you're gonna change your methodology and like I want to commit to that, you gotta kind of commit to it, right? Like it seems like half, just like anything else in life, you kind of half commit. Like what's the value of that?
I see. So like waterfall is more like legacy, like traditional, like the old man at the board, like reading the
It
PowerPoints, while
from
agile
what
is more
yeah, what it
modern.
seems like waterfall was the old way of doing it per se is how it seems, and agile is like the new flashy thing, kind of like saying the word AI and like it's like whoa.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, whether it's the right or wrong approach is a different story. I haven't spent as much time like on individual work streams, like
Mm,
participating in like an agile and waterfall like environment. Most of my roles have been like I was my first role is I was on the program office, so that kind of was the team that reported on what all the work streams below were doing. So we were doing a merger. There was like 250 like different work streams across like all the lines of businesses, which are kind of like see it as like departments, I guess, is a simple way to look
Hmm.
at it. So you might have like legal, audit, mortgage, human
Yeah.
resources, and like they each have one to many work streams that are doing individual like projects, whatever the business might be. So we kind of just reported an overall like, hey, here's what all 250 of them are doing from like a status perspective. Like, are they red? Are they yellow? Are they
Mm.
green? Stuff like that.
Okay, I
So
like
that
it.
was that was the first couple of years.
Okay, I like it. How, well, I guess, do you expect consulting to grow or decline as like an industry or a sect in like, let's say, the next 5 to 10 years?
I think a lot of like banking and like even consulting related jobs would decline, right? Because like naturally, I feel like if we have a connection to banking, if those are like bankers hire us a lot for like, consulting,
Mm-hmm.
if they kind of go away as much, I feel like we would as well, just from that like relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't be surprised, right? Like if there's not as many bankers, like the banks start incorporating AI and other technologies to simplify a lot of more mundane jobs. Like you don't need as many people. So I'm sure they're gonna let folks go. There won't be as much like business from for our side because there's less folks hiring us as well. So I think that's possible. I think my
Mm-hmm.
industry could also be like impacted slightly by it, right? Like I'm sure you of all people know that like there's AIs nowadays that like can like help you with PowerPoints. Like they're
Yeah.
Microsoft themselves like working with a couple of Fortune 100 companies to work on that, right? So like
Yeah.
that future's coming, right? So if part of my job is to like do something and like make it like a presentation of it to display and get my message across, your value really gets significantly chunked if some AI can you just type in like the context of like provided information and
Mm-hmm.
then it'll spew out a better like presentation than you were gonna make.
Definitely. I gotta let's play. I'm gonna go up course real quick. Let's play like, how does the consulting? If you were like the CEO of NTT Data or any consulting firm, how do you protect your employees' future against the threat of AI?
I think so. You would need a couple things, right? You would need like folks that want to stay. So I think
Mm,
naturally, like you got to make sure you're paying your folks like enough that like they don't want to dip out on you essentially, because
yeah.
if that's the case, like you're gonna have to replace your talent, and it seems like replacing talent, like when you have like a fully functioning team that's working well, it kind of sucks, right? Like it delays things. You got to go find someone like that's like the right fit. Sometimes
Yeah.
that's really hard to find. So you want to keep your folks, right? So paying them enough, and then I think like giving them like proper and good education, not just like some like generic training that you get pushed out by companies and like you can retake the test 100 times and eventually you pass and it's done. Like some like actual like good training, like pay for materials, like do it in like group settings so like folks are more like willing to want to do it, like be more like fun activity, and then get them more qualified, right? Like especially like in consulting, right? Like the way it is, like they pay me a salary, and I'm
Mhm.
I'm essentially their product in the sense of like they need to bill me out to make money. If they don't bill me out and I'm not like billing money to from my client or getting money from the client, they're not making money, right? So then it's just a sunk cost of
Mm,
my salary. So like it's in their best interest for me to perform as good as best as possible, right? Like my success is clearly correlated to their financial success.
mm,
So I would invest more in the resources and get them to be as good as possible, right? Like we're not like a top four consulting company, but maybe you can like treat me like train me to become like one. I'm not saying that like I
yeah.
could or couldn't, but like get
Yeah.
the regimen going that like produces that type of talent.
Definitely.
I think talent development's like your best like bang for your buck, especially if your talent is the product.
I that's a line right there. That line, it's the truth though. I'm going through kind of the same thing at my company where like I'm trying to get promoted and it's very hard and it's like, oh well, you haven't done this thing and it's like, well, I haven't been. It's not that I mean,
There's no chance to do it.
yeah, exactly. And it's like well, I could do it in my free time, like, and I work 90 hours a week, but it's like, maybe you should have some things put into place where like you can develop and cultivate your young talent rather than just in an interview process say, oh well, you should have done these things. Yeah, so I agree. I love it. Give well, you had a thought?
No, I was just like I don't know. I just find that interesting how that works out that way.
Yeah, that's definitely the word. Interesting. It's definitely the word. Give us your day to day. And like I guess like maybe like 8 to or whatever time you go whatever time you go into work. If you're remote, if you're in office, hybrid.
So I think it depends first of like on the project. So like I've been on the same project for the past since November. So
Mhm.
from November to present day, however many months it's been at this point, I think it's like what 9 or something. The
Yeah.
past 9 months, my life has been on the same project. So I've been doing the kind of like the same objective. The project was overall called Get Well. We're here to make this space of this technology that we're in, of the bank that we're in essentially better, right? Like make them
Mhm.
healthier, make them overall better. That was the overall mission. So they hired another consulting firm. My three peers were there to kind of project manage that consulting firm and ensure that they get across the finish line. And that
Okay.
firm was responsible for making recommendations to the client around like like hey, this is how you get better. So that was the first couple of months, but ended up getting added to that contract for a separate specific mission. Mine was in my previous role, I was doing more establishing a framework around like what changes and releases that the technology teams are deploying. So like
Okay.
each weekend, the banks, for example, will be deploying changes when there's like, like the banks are closed on the weekend. So it's like the best time to deploy technology changes, like the least amount of impact if things go wrong. So they'll be doing their changes and whatnot. And I'm there to kind of provide visibility into what it is that's happening from like the change perspective, what's being deployed. I'm there to gather like the value, right? Like what's the business value? What's the story here? Like why does anyone care that you are doing this? If you don't do it, why does that matter, right? Like what happens? Is there any like client impact? Does this make our teams lives easier? Like what does this do? So I'm there to kind of like define that. And the challenge that was initially like brought in to solve was like the lack of visibility. In this particular space, we're in like the payments technology space, and they had like kind of four different like verticals, and within those verticals were multiple teams. So with like this many teams all deploying things on like a week to week basis, it was just kind of hard to keep up with like what's happening in this entire space.
Hmm.
So I got brought in. The first couple of months was kind of like, like it was kind of like chasing around, like figuring out what's going on, right? Like the first month, like org charts were a big help. Like who works for who? Like what does this
Yeah.
look like? Then like I work with like one of my client partners. Like she's she's a she works at the bank as a
Hmm.
full-time employee, and I'm the one that directly works with her, but she's not the one that's like paying the bill. So like her boss's
Mm.
boss is the one that's like my boss, for example.
Interesting.
So
Okay.
we work together on the same objective, like around these like changes and like bringing clarity and visibility around them. That team is kind of called operational readiness. So
Okay.
just ensuring like that the changes going through, they're clean in the sense of like they'll be successful because everything's been vetted. Like if they're dependent on this technology team to perform XYZ action, they verified that that team is available at the time that's needed. Just like if it's like a very high risk, like it's gotten the approval, like the necessary approvals from these 10 people or whatnot. Just making sure the due diligence is done before something gets deployed, because like if something goes down, like it's like say like you and like I just paid rent like a week or two ago. Say
Hmm.
that like your bank account just didn't process the payment. That's gonna piss you off as a customer, because now like
Yeah.
you can't pay rent. Like well, you have to now go get like a money order or something. You would need like cash for that. Like it just
Yeah.
like that's gonna you might move your money and like stop doing business with them.
Yeah.
So in their situation, like these type of like technology issues, like say they like accidentally took down like bill pay, or like Zelle gets taken out and you can't pay me back for dinner. Like
Yeah.
those are real life problems. So like they have to kind of make sure they're like ideally perfect.
Hmm.
Obviously, like it's impossible to be perfect, but you can always try your best to get as close to it as you can. So that's kind of the objective there. Bring
Definitely.
visibility and make sure that there's stability. It's like
Definitely.
the main goals.
Okay. I love it. I had a question. So is it I guess is it a common theme for consulting companies to consult other consulting companies?
I so I don't know how common it is, but I've seen it a couple of times. I
Okay.
thought it was kind of weird, right? Because you would think that like that's the competition. But
Yeah.
like we're expected to go in there with like good faith, right? Like, like one of the guys was like our age. The rest of the team were like in their 40s, 50s. They were all really nice, like, like they'd say hi all the time. But
Yeah.
so like I think like the way that we had to approach it is like, like from like a human being perspective, they're nice people, they're friendly, should be
Yeah.
nice back. And then like from like a professional perspective, like obviously be professional. Like we're not like doing anything that's inappropriate, but like end of the
Yeah.
day, recognize like they might be in a closed door meeting talking about their next opportunity. So we need to be thinking ahead about our next opportunity, like stuff like that.
Yeah.
End
Okay.
of the day, it is business, right? Like they can be kind, we can be kind back. We're not gonna, like, we have the same objective.
Yeah.
You should never like let that get in your way, because like then it's not a good look for you and your firm, that
Definitely.
like you would try to like like if you and I both got hired to like fix a problem and like you're sabotaging me, like that's not a good look.
Yeah, you're right. So are is your in this, I guess, specific instance, is your firm managing their firm, or are you kind of working in tandem with each other?
So that was something that we were kind of like managing, in the sense of like we're not like responsible over them. The
Okay.
client's the one that's both of our bosses. We work kind of
Mm,
together to like report out on the results, make sure that like any issues that they have. Like, so for example, at one point they needed to get a bunch, they finished like the first month or something, and they needed to get the deliverables approved so that they could get paid.
okay.
There was, I guess, those approvers, they were being slow, right? Like they were busy with their day jobs or whatever reason, they weren't approving. So like it was our job to make sure that like these 50 documents from all these approvers get approved. So like we got like that Excel tracker going, and like we're there on like a mission, like finding people, hunting them down, like, hey, we need your approval on this. And like
Yeah.
then they'd hit you with like, oh, this deliverable is incorrect because of blah blah blah. Like tell tell Deloitte like to fix it. And I'm like, okay, well now I gotta take this back, go to Deloitte, be like, hey, they said this is incorrect, and then like they'd fix it, and then you're
Mm.
like, all right, now can you prove it now? So it was just like it's a lot of like chasing, and like the main goal for that effort is to make sure that the client, right, like they get what they want, and what they want is for this Deloitte team to finish and give recommendations.
Mm. Okay.
But
I like it.
to add there, like that was a specific engagement that ended like in April. So like starting April to now, we're on a new kind of contract with them. So they have three of us as like analysts. They have like they call us technical analysts. That's just how they onboarded us.
Hmm.
Um, Title doesn't really impact much. It has more to do with them internally than it does with us. Because at the
Okay.
end of the day, I'm a business consultant,
Yeah.
but we get brought in. We're technical analysts, and I'm kind of just picking back up with what I was working on, right? So like
Mm.
I do like other like small mini projects as like the client might like bring them to me. Like currently they want me to figure out um what validation looks like for their post implementation of their changes. Like what things do
Mm.
they already do? What gaps do they have? Like what can they do better?
Yeah.
Like one example is like the wires team. Like they can't like test on weekends because the Fed's closed. So like they can't test
Mm.
until Monday. So like that's like it is what it is, but like that's a gap, right?
Yeah.
So like we're trying to like that was just like a recent ask I got. It's like, hey, like we need to get that documented. So I'm gonna have to now meet with all the respective teams, like figure out like, hey, what's your process look like? Document that, like figure out like what gaps they have. They're gonna have to go take it back, ask their teams, compile that, get it back to us. So it's like it's a lot of like getting information and like
Yeah.
preparing it, but like you have to solicit information from so many different groups and like collecting it from like so many different sources. So it's like it's not like oh, he's just asking a simple question. Like no, I have
Yeah.
to that they have to ask it to 15 different groups. They need to go take it to their
Mm.
internal teams, talk it out, get me the correct answer, because like you can't just give me a BS answer. Like you gotta like give me an accurate one.
I
So
love that.
that's what they're.
Okay, I love that. Okay, wow, you giving some art. You are giving some really like detailed, like great answers. Like I don't feel like I could be a consultant, because obviously it's gonna be more in depth and like in your day to day workflow. But like I'm imagining like what you're going through on a day to day
I
basis.
don't know. I feel like you could, because like I feel like the biggest traits for consultants is being like an adaptable person, right? Like as I told you, like our
Mm,
body of work, who knows what I'm doing like next year, 2 years from now? Like it really depends on the project, right? Like
yeah.
hopefully it's something I know how to do, but like if it's not, I'm probably have to figure it out. right? Like it's
That's
not gonna be something
interesting.
like too out of my realm, but like if it's like something like I don't know, like some basic SQL or something, like the expectation would be that I have to like then go learn some basic SQL. So it's like it
What?
really
Okay.
depends on what you get slotted into, but the thing is like that's really out of your control. All you have that can to influence that is like your skill set, right? Like whatever you come in with, and then you have typically firms will have fulfillment teams, and those people will like use like your internal like profile. You might have like an internal resume and an internal profile slide, and like they use that to kind of like match you on projects and like different like engagements that you could work on. So it
Mhm.
really just depends. Like, hey, like for me, I got my first one was like, oh, I have an MIS degree. Let's make him a reporting analyst. So it's just like you kind of got to get lucky
Mm.
that way.
Yeah.
So it really depends on like what's out there. So in situations like now where there's less out there, I'm sure folks have to be a lot more flexible, right? Like I
Yeah.
maybe you're not like if I'm really into Excel, maybe I'm not doing Excel next time. Maybe I'm doing like communications or something like that. But like again, I'd be expected to be able to do it and be able to do it at like a high level.
That's interesting. I'm really loving this conversation. And now that you mentioned like the internal fulfillment team, like what does like what's like the possibilities of growth as a consultant? Like what's like I guess entry level consultant to like maybe like I think I know you at a personal level, so I know you can do whatever you want to do. But like, let's say like
Yeah,
the average, like let's say like an average person goes into be a consultant. What's like their ceiling in the consulting industry?
I mean, I feel like in most industries, right? Like people like don't make it past like the manager level. Maybe it's because like they don't want to be a manager. Like I've met folks that simply just don't want to be responsible for other folks. Like
Yeah,
work is just not like that deep to them.
yeah,
So I'm taking a guess there, but I would assume it's more than likely like senior consultant is like most folks that like might exit the industry. They probably get to that level and they're like, all right, I'm done.
mm,
Or maybe it's just straight up entry level consultant. They're like they do it for a bit. And they're like, this isn't for me. Like I don't like the fact that like I feel like in consulting, given the fact that our bill rates are like kind of really high, in my opinion, I feel like
yeah,
you have to kind of constantly justify your worth and like why you should be there and like why you deserve
yeah,
like your contract renewed versus like full time employees. I mean, you just kind of go to work. Something goes wrong, like you're still going to work the next day. Like unless you get fired, like you're good,
yeah,
right? So it's a lot like more stress in that sense that like we kind of like constantly be proving ourselves, like making sure we're documenting what we do, like from like a win perspective, so that we can like milk it down the road. Like that just it's just
mm,
like a constant doing that. So that gets exhausting sometimes. Like even like this week, right? Like um we were asked for like a Q3, Q4 like outlook of what we're doing, right? So we make this
mm,
whole document of like, hey, here's what we're gonna work on for Q3 and Q4, and then it shifts into like, hey, we need accomplishments for Q1 and Q2. So like, sounds like people are probably getting pressed to justify like our value, right? Like if we're
yeah,
costing this much, like what are they doing for us? So now we're having like I'm gonna have to go like spend tomorrow making like all this like slide on like here's what like our operational readiness team accomplished in quarter 1 and 2. Like we brought visibility into the organization on like what changes are deploying by like getting all the individual verticals on like these SharePoint calendars where they would put all their changes, and then we overlaid all those calendars onto one calendar, so you have like one single view where like leaders could simply go in, like they don't have to click into these reports or anything like that. It just like go to the link, here's the calendar, here's all your changes. And so that was like the first like couple of months, and then like like getting like a framework that people would follow of like, hey, like we need you to enter your change. Like when you enter your change, make sure you put the change ID, put a description of what it is, like
mm,
put the date of when it's supposed to happen, like kind of like getting that behavior to become like a habit, right? Like they need to like learn to do it and like remember like, hey, when I'm doing this, like the next thing I should do is go add it to the calendar so that they know. So that was like
mm.
like the first couple of months, and then we worked on other things as well. So tomorrow is really just going to be taking that, like we met earlier today to make like an accomplishments list. So I have like little like rough draft of that, and like tomorrow is going to be turning into a presentable document that could be seen in front of senior leadership.
Wow. Okay.
So like
Goodness.
here we are July 13th, right? Like I have until the end of the year for my contract, but we're kind of constantly in like a defend yourself mode. Like what have you done? What value have you provided? Because like in the industry, things are rough right now, right? Like, I mean, like everyone
Yeah.
bonuses got cut, people aren't getting as like high raises, like it's kind of the reality of how it is, right? Like it wasn't
Do
like 2 years ago.
Do you ever feel like imposter syndrome yourself?
I would feel like that, yeah, 100%. Like I feel like on some days I feel like I'm a really, really good consultant. Like I'm incredibly adaptable. I figure things out. Like I try not to like come to you with a problem until I've like exhausted all the options, and like then I'm like, hey, like I'm defeated. Like help. Like our
Yeah.
goal is the same. Like help me not fix this stuff for you,
Yeah.
right? Like so I feel like I have the good attitude and stuff. But like other days I'm like, what? I feel like when I'm doing the same repetitive work, I'm not learning as much. And then when I'm not learning as
Mm,
much, and I'm seeing other people like around me like learning, like I feel like I'm like, oh, am I getting like left behind in like in the development sense? So I feel like
mm,
it's kind of like a battle of like I want like proper work life balance in the sense of like I'm not trying to work like 60, 70 hours. Like development is not the only focus in life, right? Like end of the day, I'd like to live my life, relax, like go out to eat, make dinners, like hang out with
yeah.
my girlfriend, like see my friends, like I want to do things, right? So it's
Yeah.
like a kind of like a battle of like sometimes not feeling it's like you know enough, and then like, well, I could go learn more, but at the same time it's like you have to give up like the fun and like the things that you like to do. So it's just kind of finding a balance like in between that. I think for the
True.
most part, I'd say it's like a 75% of the time that like I think that I'm him. Other times, other times I'm like, but you just gotta kind of like put on that face and like fake it till
Yeah.
you make it, right? Like you can't let that kind of get to you. You kind of gotta ignore it, put it to the back of your head. Um, I know when like 2 years ago, I was talking to someone about the same like type of thing, like imposter syndrome is like a whole like my first role I told you was like that reporting analyst. So I did like Excel for like a year and a half. And
Yeah.
then like they automated everything I did. So then I
Mm,
stopped having to do like 80% of my job. And I'm like, so now what? Like, what am I doing? Like, what's
yeah.
like, and like, cause like I only had like 10 hours of work like each week. But like on our contract, we didn't bill by the hours. It was just like a flat, like X million of dollars for these 20 people to do this objective. Right.
Yeah.
So like it didn't matter whether I was doing 10 hours or 50 hours because they just needed me to finish my body of work. And I was finishing
Yeah.
that body of work. So until someone gave me more work to do, I was just kind of like there. So like it was just like a weird feeling. So like I felt like I was losing some of my like Excel skills. Like like I went from doing it every single week, like
Yeah.
4 times a week to like to like what once a week to do some like basic stuff. So I
Mm,
felt like I was, like losing that. I was like, what if my next project, like it's like a reporting thing, and I'm like, I don't know how to do my stuff. And she's like, dude, you learned it once, you know it. You're gonna learn it again when you need to know it. Like you don't need to like have that armed with you like at all times of like, oh, you know how to do X, Y, Z. Like part of like your job as a consultant is to like figure it out if you don't know it, right?
true.
Like
Very true.
if I forget how to do something in Excel, I have a computer right in front of me and I can just Google how to do it and I'll learn it in like the next like minute and a half. Right.
exactly.
So it's like
You,
I'm not like helpless and like I'm stuck and like the world ends because I don't know this one thing in Excel. Like
yeah.
I will solve the problem and move on. Like that's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And
You're
that's
right.
part of like what being a consultant is, that like these type of problems like don't stop us from getting to whatever like the client's goal is. We kind of just
Facts.
figure it out and move on. Right. And like
Facts.
sometimes like it might not just be us figuring it out. Like this I'm not acting like I can figure out every problem because I definitely can't. You build
Yeah.
like you build like peers around you that that like like this other consultant, like this person like is good at that. Like this person knows like is good for like reviewing my PowerPoints because they have like an eye for detail in something. This person's
Mm,
really good with their Excel macros, so I can ask them for questions if I get stuck there. Like kind of like figuring out who's good at what, and like having folks that can like double check you. Like you can like pitch to them if you think like if you have to present in front of the client, like maybe I can practice with you before I go do it to the client. Stuff like
yeah.
that. Like you got to like build like a support team, right? Like just like I feel
Mm,
like most jobs you kind of have to like not like befriend your like coworkers, but like be colleagues, right? Like
yeah.
you guys like especially like on my project, for example, like there's three of us on the same contract. We're all three doing kind of like different individual things, like but we're all for the same like overall mission, which is get well. They want
Yeah.
humans to get better. So we're doing totally different things, but we're on the same team. We work for the
Yeah.
same company. Like if like one of them's like sick or like something goes wrong, like we kind of have to like help each other like get that work done. Like it's I know what they're both working on. Like they kind of know what I'm working on. Like they don't. We can like replace each other like that. Like it's not like, oh, if they fire him, like I can go do his job because I can. I'd have to go learn it, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I'd have to hope that it's like it's documented or someone else would have to catch me up. But we know the gist of what we're doing and we step in like when it's needed. Like if like recently, I mean, I had COVID, right? So like um I had a PowerPoint. We were doing some team had reached out and asked us, hey, we need a view of quarter 3 changes, and like this was like last Thursday. Last Wednesday I had COVID. I was flying out like the next day for a wedding, and I was like, I can't do like the whole quarter yet because I have like
Yeah.
20 other things I'm doing because I just got back from Guatemala, right? Like I went on a trip before that.
Yeah.
So she was like, but I showed her how she can get the same information because like, we have that calendar that we created that has all the changes, and then
Yeah.
we have a dashboard that you can double check it in case the calendar is not right. So like I showed her how to do it. She did it for July, thankfully, which is really nice. And then I told her like, hey, I'll come back next week and I'll do the rest of it.
Mhm.
And so in that situation, like like I did the rest, and like everything else was fine. But like my teammate had to come in and cover for me in the sense of like, hey, can you fix this PowerPoint slide for me so that I can like do this for her? And he was like, yeah, so send me the thing, and I shoot it over to him. He fixes it for me, sends it back, and like it saves me like 30 minutes of my life, right? So it's like
Mm,
I can go focus on whatever it is that I'm working on. So just like
definitely.
be a decent teammate. Like don't be like I don't want to be inappropriate, but like don't be rude, right? Like that's just
Yeah.
like the main thing. Like we're all in the same
Yeah.
thing. If the client's unhappy with one of us, like we all three could get fired, right? Like so you don't
Yeah.
want to really like risk it because like, oh, I don't want to help my coworker out. It's not
Definitely.
like a good look for you.
Okay, I love it, man. This has been a great interview. We're gonna move to the not so speed rounds. We're gonna ask, I think, like 7 quick questions, and
Okay.
we're just gonna see your answers. The first question is 4 words that describe a consultant.
Dependent, adaptable, unnecessary, experts.
Okay, why the word unnecessary?
I don't think they're always necessary. I think
Mm,
a lot of the time that like I'd say like so like I think teams are bloated, right? Like if you have a team of like 10, you probably only need 5. That's
mm,
just I don't know I don't know if that's unique to just consultants. I'm sure that corporate America itself also has a bunch of that. But
yeah,
like I feel like teams are bloated, right? Like but like in the sense of like from a business perspective, I get
yeah,
why a consulting firm wants to deploy as much of their employees to make as much money, and clients, I mean, they want the work to get done, right? So like they kind of
yeah.
just pay it. But like to me, I don't feel like people are always like needed that much.
You know who would agree with you?
No,
Elon Musk.
oh my goodness. My 80%, yes, I don't think it's that drastic. I think that's a little bit too far there. But I think for the most part, like I don't know, like especially like more of like the entry level folks. I
Mhm.
think I think we would need like a bit more like learning. But I,
Yeah,
I think that the way it's done is it's a lot more like on the job learning.
yeah,
You kind of have to like be like quick, smart, like figure it out, like be organized enough to like take your own notes and whatnot. It's like you got to keep up.
yeah. Makes sense. Okay, that makes sense. What's another profession that consulting is like?
Hmm. Consulting, I would say, weirdly enough, kind of like parenting.
That's a good one.
I guess like parenting can be a profession for sure, right?
Yeah,
Some people it's unpaid labor, it's paid labor, it's definitely a profession.
yeah,
And I think a lot of it, like times, like we're not doing anything crazy. We're just like party A is beefing with party B, and we're just kind of there to like diffuse the situation and like get both sides to agree on something. Like,
yeah,
or like maybe we're babysitting or like holding someone's hand to get to like the objective, like, hey, we need you to do this, like, and like maybe they're being difficult and they're not doing it, so we make like a job aid, like, hey, here's how you do it, so that like
yeah.
it takes them less time. Like, I feel like a lot of our job is just making other people's jobs easier. So
Mm.
just from that perspective.
That was a really creative answer, and I love it. And it makes sense. It's a really really creative answer. Okay, I like it. What does a world without consulting look like?
Um, I think a world without consultants, I mean, I think other people would be making more decisions, right? Like the business leaders at those respective firms that hire consultants would have to kind of just make more decisions. You guys, they would then have to probably hire more skilled, particularly skilled folks to go do that body of work, right? Like
Mm.
if if NTT has like this particular dude that's very skilled in ServiceNow like dashboards and like you need one built, you need to either have an employee that knows how to do that, find a person that knows how to do that, or you're gonna go have to find someone like an expert in that particular thing. So it's just like the world could continue without us, but you would have to kind of hire someone else to do it. So maybe there'd be
Mm.
less consultants, but there would be more like independent service now, like the dashboard workers or something like that. So like
Yeah.
they wouldn't really like go away. They'd just be called
Okay.
something else.
Okay. That makes sense. I like that. Okay. What's the worst stigma associated with your job? The worst
I think
stigma.
like the top like four, maybe like top 10 consulting firms that they have like a lot of like stigma around like kind of like their arrogance and whatnot, and like
Hmm.
consultants get paid a lot of money, and like my firm is like not as like not on like the high end like them, right? Like they get paid way more, they bill out way more, like for like the cost per hour for them is a lot more like than us. Like we're
Yeah.
apparently like the cheap ones, and like I'm telling you that I
Mm.
think that we're like too expensive. So it's like the numbers they give us me billing, like I would kind of make me like go into shock, right?
Yeah.
So that I think that's one of the like the perceptions folks have. Like a lot of consultants are like arrogant, and, like kind of know it alls, and I'm sure there's a bunch of them out there. Like, I could definitely see like this is an industry full of like type A like people, like they do the
Yeah.
best from what I've seen, because a lot of it's relationships, right? Like relationships with
Mm.
the client to get the next contract, relationships with people that like know the right people to like help you with whatever. Like no one's an expert in everything. Like you're gonna
Yeah.
need help from someone else. So if you know like who that someone else is, like in that department that could help,
Yeah.
you're more than likely to succeed than someone else is.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. You're right. Yeah. I definitely. There's definitely I guess Instagram and social media is really funny about consultants. There's definitely there's a lot of, I wouldn't say there's stigmas, but definitely a lot of like chatter about them. It's really like I think what's really bigger right now is like stigmas. It's like product management. Like there's a lot of like
Yeah,
stigmas on product
project
management
management
now.
jokes. I follow a couple of consulting pages on Instagram. They always crack me up just because like they just have such funny jokes. And
Yeah.
like it'll be stereotypical, but like they're good. They hit
Yeah.
really well.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta laugh at yourself. Like you have to. Like everything's life is not that serious in that aspect. I guess. What's Oh, are you underpaid or overpaid as a consultant?
I think compared to my peers, I am underpaid. I think consultants are overpaid, but I'm definitely
Mm.
underpaid, and I deserve to be paid a bit more. So if my manager is listening, six figures at least.
Is it at least? I agree. I second that. I second that. What's one person, book, or event that changed the trajectory of your life for the positive?
Hmm. They made us read, like it's nothing like too deep, but like they made us read a book when we first like started called like the Trusted Advisor or something like that.
Hmm.
And it wasn't anything that like I read this and I was like, whoa, like I'm a changed person, but like kind of reinforced like a lot of messages I feel like a decent human being like knows, right? Like it was kind of like a lot of, something that stuck with me was like you kind of have to like build the trust. Like you don't just come in and like you're this person's like trusted advisor and like that's what they go to with their problems. Like you kind of have to like prove to them like you're worth like something, right? Like oh, like I can
Yeah.
solve this small problem for you. Like maybe next time I can do this one for you, and like kind of like building your way up to becoming
Yeah.
that trusted advisor. So like I think like in consulting, like with clients, for example, like I might have like a director that's like the one that owns the relationship with the client. Like they talk and like the client tells my director like, yo, I need your people to do these 10 things. And the director then tells the manager who then tells us consultants. Like it just kind of like that's how it goes like in that cycle.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Last question, Pish.
Last question.
Let's say you met you go in a time machine, you meet a young Pesh, and he says, I want to be a consultant. What are the steps that you give him? And let's say he's 18, first out of high school.
18 high school. I would
Yeah.
say a lot more coding. I think all of our recent